Um, so we're recorded now. So look, last week we completed the Gemara till the Mishnah. That's what we did. We completed the Gemara till the Mishnah in Gimel Amud Bet. And we've seen also, and we went deep into it. It was like we digressed a little bit because, and it's not that we digressed, because I'll explain. In Gimel Amud Bet, the structure of the page that we've seen till now is the following. First, there is a discussion of the innovation of Rabbi Yonathan, that he says really two innovations that he combines that makes it a big chiddush, each one on its own, and the combination of the two. A, he assumes that there is a possibility for a ruling of 100 dayanim, meaning 71 is not a set number that cannot be added to. Okay? I related to that last week. This innovation is not that simple. If you read the Rambam, for instance, you get the impression that the ruling is that there's a cap of 71, okay? At least regarding some areas. But it's more complex, and we started introducing a certain idea based on an innovation of Rav Soloveitchik that Sanhedrin had two roles, two hats. They had a hat as the people who are legislating and responsible for the transmission of the Torah Sheba'al Peh, the oral Torah. And they also had a different hat of representatives of Am Yisrael to all kinds of aspects and things, okay? Like, for instance, Kiddush HaChodesh, like giving permission to the king, appointing a king, going to a war, appointing a king, going to a war, okay? All of these roles are the roles of Sanhedrin as kind of a certain, for some in Yonim, they're the representatives of Klal Yisrael, okay? Beseder? So, and here he wanted to say that regarding the legislative role, indeed there is a cap of 71, and no, the opposite, excuse me. Rav Soloveitchik wanted to say that the representative quorum is something set. It's part of like the formal thing. There couldn't be more than 71. However, if it's issues of interpretations of the Torah and etc., then if there's a need, one can add even more than 71. Okay? Then, of course, after using this and that's a big shir, and Rav Lichtenstein has a lot of sources. I didn't give all the sources regarding to establish that chiluk of Rav Soloveitchik. Okay? I only mentioned that Rav Lichtenstein himself said that it's a brilliant idea and it solves some problems. And Rav Soloveitchik spoke about it in one of his shiurim, Yortzeit shiurim, famous Yortzeit shiurim. The problem is that it doesn't work with some of the sources. That the set number is for the formal thing, and that the possible addition is regarding the legislative role. But I just thought, and this Rav Lichtenstein didn't discuss, our case, what does it belong to? And it's a very interesting question. I'll explain. Because what is Rabbi Yonathan saying? Here, I'll repeat. First, the pshat. Rabbi Yonathan saying, A, there is a possibility for 100 judges. B, and here is the very important innovation, regarding the bull, the public bull, meaning in order for this to be defined, a mistake of Klal Yisrael, that you need a chatas of Klal Yisrael, a special chatas of Klal Yisrael, not individual chatas. So in order to this to be defined, not just a sin of many Jews, but to be a sin of this abstract construct of Klal Yisrael, okay? For that, he says, you need that all the judges unanimously, all the 100 will give that Erd ruling. Okay? I'm not sure it's Erd. Gabe, you told me, what's the word?
I said errant last time, but it's actually erroneous.
Right, erroneous ruling. Right, thank you. Erroneous ruling. So for that erroneous ruling, he claims, Rabbi Yonathan, that there is a requirement that unanimously all the 100 will give that erroneous ruling, which is a big surprise. The Gemara is surprised because we have a general law of majority ruling, rubo kechulo, yeah, rubo kechulo. Beseder? So the Gemara challenges and challenges and challenges Rabbi Yonathan and challenges and dismisses the challenges. And then the Gemara ends before the next section that we've seen last week, but I'll just say a word about it. The Gemara concludes and says, proves from the Rabbi Yonathan's anchor was that it says Kol Adat Yisrael. Should have been said Ve'im Adat Yisrael Yishku. Since it says Kol, so Rabbi Yonathan learns that here we have a special law, a special Gzera Sakatov, that in order to be chayiv in public bull, you need unanimous ruling of the Sanhedrin. Then the Gemara said, excuse me, we have a verse regarding Gzerot, regarding decrees of the sages. B'me'era atem noarim v'oti atem kov'im hagoy kulo. Okay? So it says hagoy kulo, all the nation. The verse, the way the sages interpret it, it says, you are making a Gzera, and then you are not following it, and you should be punished for that. But when is that you should be punished when you're not following the decree of the sages? Hagoy kulo, only if all the people accepted, the people of Am Yisrael accepted the decree. Because if the Shomrei Mitzvos did not accept the decree of the sages, it's not a valid decree. And they say that Hagoy Kulo here, all the nation, the acceptance of all the nation of the decree, doesn't mean all, it means majority. The minute that the majority of the people of Israel accepted the decree, it's as if all the nation accepted it. Rubo kechulo, the Gemara says. So the Gemara says, hello, you have kol here and you have kol here. And in both of the places, so if here majority is considered the interpretation of the word kol, so it should be the same regarding the public bull. And the Gemara is left with a knockout. It sees as a dismission of Rabbi Yonathan's opinion. Indeed, in order to be chayav in a public bull, it's enough that a majority ruling of the Sanhedrin is a ruling, an erroneous ruling. You don't need that all of them will do it. That's the Gemara. I mentioned that Rav Lichtenstein has a kashya that he leaves unanswered. That l'chora, why go so far and prove from the topic of decrees that rubo kechulo? In our case itself, no one requires that all the Jews, that's what I said about the elections in the United States, no one requires, even at Rabbi Yonathan, that all the Jews will make the error, eat the chalev. It's enough that the majority of the Jews, that is, everyone agrees. Rabbi Yonathan also agrees. So you see that rubo kechulo, because it's a public bull. Okay? Well, I think I have an answer. I thought about it. And I think I have an answer. Why they are going, their toreach, to go to another different issue of decrees, to bring the proof that rubo kechulo, okay, and to challenge Rabbi Yonathan that here says that since it's written kol, it must be unanimous. Why they're going over there and not bringing the proof from here? It says kol adat Yisrael yishgu. And obviously it's not the majority, it's not all the Jews, it's the majority of the Jews. So listen to my answer. You're with me? First of all, everyone is still following me, or I'm lecturing and because I'm not attached to the text. I'm now speaking.
I'm with you.
What?
I'm with you.
Okay, so I'll be very. We'll go soon to the text. Don't worry, mamash. In Leonetta in 3 minutes. I want to just crystallize the point here. The verse says regarding public bull, "Ve'im kol adat Yisrael yishgu." If all the people of Israel, the Ada, nation of Israel, will err, will do an error. And Rabbi Yonathan interprets that this verse refers to the Beidin that issued the ruling, Kol Adat Yisrael Yishgu. And he says, since it's written Kol, Kol is an extra word. It was enough to say Adat Yisrael Yishgu. That's already all the people, Adat. If it says Kol, that means all and not majority. That's Rabbi Yonathan. Comes the Gemara and says, I have a verse with the word kol regarding decrees. And there it says, Hagoy kulo, the decree is valid only if all the nation accepts the decree of the sages. And yet still the interpretation is that it's not that all the people of Israel accepted the decree, it's enough that the majority of them accepted the decree. Okay, so here you see that the word kol literally can mean majority. And the Gemara says that that's a knockout to Rabbi Yonathan. Okay? Comes Rav Lichtenstein that says, I don't get it. It's a very weird Gemara. Kol Adat Yisrael Yishgu definitely refers also to the people of Israel who just made the mistake. Okay? And still we know Rabbi Yonathan concedes that you don't need that every single Jew will eat the chaylev, that it's enough that just the majority of the Jews will eat the chaylev. So here you see that the word kol doesn't mean all, but means majority. Well, I think the answer is simple. They weren't able to prove that from our case to our case, because that's exactly Rabbi Yonathan's point. Maybe it's not pshat, but Rabbi Yonathan understands that this clause, in kol adat Yisrael yishgu, is referring only to Beidin. Then later on, it says, Ne'elam was sealed from the eyes of the Ada. Of course, it talks about that this ruling was materialized, was fruitful with at least a majority of Jews following it. If it was only a ruling, then of course there's no public bull, because all the paragraph there speaks about a case where A, there was a ruling, B, obviously, there was an action of mistake. But the clause, Kol Adat Yisrael, was referring only to the ruling. And therefore, there is no proof that the word Kol is majority, because Rabbi Yonathan says the word Kol here indeed means all the Dayanim. If it's 100, it's 100. So you don't have a proof. Meaning, Rav Lichtenstein asked about, you see definitely that in our case itself, we apply the concept of majority, because you see that you bring a public bull even if only a majority of the Jews made the action and not all the Jews made the action. Rabbi Yonathan will answer, true. I never said that we never apply the concept of majority. Of course we do apply it in many, many places. But I'm looking, but our topic is whether when it says the word, an extra word of kol, could it mean majority? Or if there's an extra word of kol, all, then it means that here there's a special din, law, that you need all, unanimous. Now you can't bring me a proof from the fact that even if only the majority of the Jews follow the erroneous ruling, you bring a public bull, that the word kol means all, doesn't mean all. No, because this clause, in kol adat Yisrael yishgu, talks only about the ruling. So I'm going to another case, where it talks about the acceptance of Am Yisrael, of the decrees of the sages. And then it's written there, Hagoy kulo. And still there it means, Hagoy kulo means the majority of the Jews. Here is a proof that even when the word is kol, and to whatever it refers, rubo kechulo, majority is as if it's all, okay? So I think the answer is pretty simple. Now, I spoke pretty technically here. till now, but I think there is some ideas behind it. What is really behind Rabbi Yonathan's idea that even though it's not that the majority of the Jews will do the mistake, but in order for that to be defined as a mistake of Klal Yisrael, then you need all the Dayanim issuing the erroneous ruling. Apparently, he understands that in order to define it not as an individual chatat and not as an individual chatas of many Jews, even the majority of the Jews, in order for that to be considered a sin of the public, as a public, you need Sanhedrin, but he says it's not enough that you need Sanhedrin, you need that it will be unanimous. You need that it will be unanimous in order for that really to be defined all the klal. That seems his intuition. And here we can say it from two sides. If you remember, we had a chakira. What is really the chatas coming for of the bull? Is the chatas really a kapara, an atonement for the dayanim, as representatives for their mistake? A mistake that was fruitful in an action, the dayanim need to bring a kapara of a bull. That could be the justification of the opinion of the Tanaim that only the dayanim bring the bull and not the people. Or no, it's actually an atonement for a public action of sin. But to define it as a public action of sin, you need, in order to define it as a public action, not a private action, you need that it will be based on a ruling issued by the Sanhedrin, right? So if the kapara, if the kapara is for the blindness of the Sanhedrin, then maybe that's what Rabbi Yonathan is saying. So he says, okay, a blindness of the Sanhedrin as representing the people of Israel, okay, but the kapara is for the issuing, not for the action, really, for the ruling. The kapara is for the ruling, not for the action. So maybe there is a requirement of unanimous. But also the other opinion can work. If I say that the kapara is for the action, I could still say that in order to define that as an action, an error of the Klal Yisrael, so not only do I need that it will be based on a ruling of the Sanhedrin, but it should be that all the Sanhedrin issued that ruling. Then and only then it's defined as a chet of the klal. And then I don't care that it's only the majority of the Jews made the mistake, because what defined it as a chet of the klal is the fact that it was issued by the central institution and it was done unanimously in that central institution. Now I'm asking you, I told you Rav Soloveitchik's distinction between the Sanhedrin's role as representatives and the Sanhedrin's role as representative, like announcing a war, appointing the king, and the Sanhedrin's role as the transmitters and interpreters of the oral Torah. Okay? What hat are they wearing here? And regarding the story of the public bull? Where will we put it? In which category? In which category will we put here? If Rav Soloveitchik has a distinction about two roles of Sanhedrin, and he goes far with it, he says it might be even two different institutions, the same people, but here there is a cap of 71, and here there is no cap of 71. As representatives, he claimed there is a cap of 71. As interpreters of the oral Torah, Dayanim might be added. What do you say? Where do we belong to here? The case is Sanhedrin are issuing an erroneous ruling, let's say, to be Mechalel Shabbos. Wow, it's so silent. Can you share with me your thoughts at least? I mean, it's okay. Just the thoughts. Think aloud. Darren.
Yes.
Is the question clear first? Is the question clear?
It is, but can you repeat it again?
All right. So look, Sanhedrin,
Yeah.
I'm giving an example. They have a role to appoint a king
Yes.
or to sanctify a moon.
Mm-hmm.
Says Rav Soloveitchik here, the hat that they're wearing is representatives of Klal Yisrael. Okay?
Okay.
Right? That's why they appoint the king as the representatives, as the central institution that represents the public.
Mm-hmm.
It's as if the public appoints that king. Okay?
Yes.
Right? The same thing is regarding sanctifying the moon. Rav Soloveitchik here says even a stronger point regarding sanctifying the moon. He says, really, originally, this is an authority that belongs to the people as people, and the Sanhedrin only were authorized by the people. Therefore, when Sanhedrin is gone, like nowadays, Rav Soloveitchik claims that still we as the public sanctify the Rosh Chodesh. Yeah. If you remember, Nachmanides, just to clarify this point, Nachmanides holds that we're not sanctifying Roshei Chodashim today. They were all sanctified by Hillel, who did the Luach, who did the calendar. He sanctified all the Roshei Chodashim till the future, till again we'll sanctify by witnesses that are seeing the moon. Yeah, but till then, he already then had the authority to sanctify all the Roshei Chodashim to the future. Okay? That's Ramban's opinion. But Rav Soloveitchik holds, and it's a big innovation. I'm not saying that it's the pshat, but he says that Maimonides disagrees. And Maimonides says that nowadays, when we celebrate Rosh Hashanah and Yom Kippur, and are saying Ya'aleh V'Yavo and Rosh Chodesh as a public, by that action, we are implicitly sanctifying the dates. So he says it's not a sanctification that was once done till the future, but actually nowadays we're still sanctifying moons implicitly by just acting according to the Luach, okay? By keeping Yom Kippur at a certain date, keeping Pesach at a certain date, Rosh Hashanah at a certain date, saying Ya'aleh V'Yavo on Rosh Chodesh, okay? Now, he says, well, you'll ask me how come it says l'chora that Sanhedrin or Beidin are the ones that are sanctifying the moons. So he says, no, actually, if you look at the list, it's not part of the roles of Beidin to sanctify the moon. So why they were doing it? They got their authority as representatives of the people of Israel. Once there is no Sanhedrin, the authority goes back to the people of Israel. Okay?
Yes.
So with sanctifying the moon, it's even a stronger example. But there is certain issues, sanctifying the moon, appointing a king, which is definitely a role of Sanhedrin. And it says that why is it a role of Sanhedrin? Because the Sanhedrin was composed by electors, excuse me again for the by representatives from all the tribes, Sanhedrin, the 71. So it was a good quorum to appoint the king. They represent the people, okay? So there is one hat that Sanhedrin are wearing regarding all kinds of issues. When they're consulted regarding going to a war, when they're appointing a king, when they're sanctifying the moons, as representatives of Am Yisrael. But the Sanhedrin are also wearing a different hat, says Rav Soloveitchik. They are in charge of interpreting and legislating and interpreting the written Torah and establishing the oral Torah, right? And transmitting, interpreting and transmitting. Okay? So I ask, our case of public bull, which is again, this happened by an erroneous ruling of Sanhedrin that the majority of the Jews followed mistakenly. And then the Sanhedrin are becoming aware of that mistake. I'm asking, what hat are they wearing here? The first hat or the second hat? Now the question is clear?
And the second hat being a lawgiver.
A lawgiver, exactly. Legislation and interpretation of the written Torah. And transmission of the oral Torah. I mean, by interpreting it correctly.
I would say the second one then.
So Darren would say the second one, and that's the intuitive answer. Actually, if they're ruling, we, according to the way we understand the Torah, we're telling you that you could violate Shabbos, or that you could eat the chalev. So l'chora, they were wearing the second hat. Okay? Anyone else wants to comment?
If the public bull has to be brought because of the people actually committing the chet, then they are acting as representatives of the people.
Mm-hmm. Right.
That's the
So
first half.
So Gabe, I agree with both. You see, I'm a big mafdalnik here, you know, a big mafdalnik. You're right, and also you're right. A classic Dati Lumi. That's the complexity here. Rav Lichtenstein didn't point out to that, but I gave it a thought. And when I gave it a thought, I got to this conclusion that here we have a very special case where they're wearing the two hats actually together. On the one hand, as Darren says, it's definitely directly a case of them sitting as interpreters of the Torah. They're giving a ruling of halacha. That's a classic, the classic hat of their as being in charge of the interpretation of the Torah, right? When they're saying eat chalev, that's what they're doing. That's very direct. No one can argue with that, with what Darren said. But on the other hand, what did we explain? That the reason why we explained, we made a distinction, I remind y'all, between a case where a tenuva wrapped a certain item in the wrong wrap. It was a kosher, the bag in the stores was a bag of a kosher item, but actually then, it turned out that there was a non-kosher item inside, a mistake of tenuva. A certain thing that they were planning to export, non-kosher item, I'm not going into the issue how and if it's allowed, but let's say, okay, and it turned out that they were selling in all the stores of Israel something that appeared to be a kosher item in terms of the bag that was inside, but actually it turned out to be non-kosher. And guess what? The majority of the Jews in Israel ate that item inadvertently, thinking it's kosher. This will not be a public bull, Haverim. This will be, if it's not on us, let's assume it's shogeg, and probably it's shogeg, it will be that each individual has to bring individual chat. There will be like tons of individuals chatas in this case. Why? Because conceptually, it's not defined as a public error. It is defined as an error that were done by many Jews. How, in order to define it, as Gabe said, as a public error, what you need is that error was done based on, it followed an erroneous ruling of the central institution that created it to be defined as a public, a Klal Yisrael, not just majority of Jews, a Klal Yisrael mistake. Now, if I say that, then hello, I see that they're wearing here also, they're wearing a dual hat. They're not just sitting here at the role of the authorized interpreters, but in order for their ruling to create the structure of a public mistake, a Klal Yisrael mistake, and not only individual mistake, I see them as representatives of the people. Not only if I say that actually the atonement is for them, for the ruling, not for the action, that the essence is atonement for the ruling, that's clear, okay? Because then I say why they need to bring kapar for the ruling, because again, it's considered a ruling of the people, okay? But even if the atonement is for the action, but in order to define it as an action of not just many individuals, but an action of the klal, to be based on a ruling that created it to be a klal, and in order for that, they need to be representatives. Yeah, that's something that represents the Klal Yisrael. So I think that is really the innovation of Rabbi Yonathan here. Rabbi Yonathan here says that there is a combination, and for the representation, you need unanimous, which is interesting. I don't know if regarding appointing a king, it should be unanimous. I never heard that. Okay. I don't know. I don't think there was really a vote there. So Tachlis, the bottom line was that it was unanimous, meaning God said, let's say that you need to appoint this king. And then the Sanhedrin are also doing it. So Luchara, it's unanimous. So Dafka, it's good. So that's interesting. Of course, when the Gemara dismisses Rabbi Yonathan's innovation and says that it's enough that a majority of the Sanhedrin will do that, okay? Probably what they say is that actually it's not a ceremonial. Rav Soloveitchik says, if I'll translate, he says that Beit Din has a tafkid tiksi. Tekes, what is a tekes? Ceremony. Meaning, actually, the first category, remember, I made a distinction between Beit Din as representatives of the people of Israel and Beit Din as transmitters and interpreters of the. That's how I presented that distinction of Rav Soloveitchik. If I'll be more accurate with his wordings, Rav Soloveitchik says that the first role, representative, is a ceremonial role. Like appointing the king, it's a ceremony, okay? Now, I assume that the people that disagree with Rabbi Yonathan and say that there's enough for a majority ruling of the judges, they would say, look, here, you don't need Beit Din as representatives in terms of the ceremonial hat. They're doing their role as the people that were authorized by the people of Israel to make to interpret the Torah. Once they do it based on majority ruling, okay, then that is already enough to define it as an error of Klal Yisrael. They don't need to wear the ceremonial hat of representatives. Meaning, let me clarify my point. The people who disagree with Rabbi Yonathan, okay, the way we explained here, we explained Rabbi Yonathan that has this innovation that you need a unanimous ruling of 100 people, okay? The people who disagree with him can actually disagree on one of 2 points. They have 2 options. Either they have a fundamental mistake, dispute with him, and they say, and listen to that, we agree with Darren and disagree with Avi Kanai and Gabe. Meaning, I think that the Gemara, when it dismisses Rabbi Yonathan, it says, hello. No, they're wearing in here only one hat. Only one hat. as interpreters of the Torah. But they are defined as the central institution, the authorized institution by Am Yisrael to interpret the Torah. Now that is enough in order to define an erroneous ruling of them that materialized in an action of the majority of Israel as a public mistake. That is enough. You don't need them to wear the hat of having the role of the representatives in the ceremonial actions. Not at all. Just go to one role they have. The central institution that was authorized by the people of Israel, by Hashem, to be the central institution that is in charge of interpreting and transmitting the Torah. The minute you said only that is enough that if a mistake was done based on their ruling, it will be defined as a public error, and not as individual errors. Got it? You understand what I'm saying? Meaning, I think that is, so the Machloket between Rabbi Yonathan and the sages, the Gemara, will be the following according to this interpretation. Whereas Rabbi Yonathan understands that in order to be defined as a public bull, Beit Din are really wearing two hats, and for that you need unanimous. The sages are saying no, to be defined as a public error, you don't need the ceremonial hat of representatives of the people of Israel. It's enough that that's the central, the authorized central institution that rules the ruling to define it as a public error. Okay? Still another way that they can argue with them is to say, you know what, we agree with you that they're wearing here also a ceremony, that in order to be defined as a public error, you need that they will wear the hat of ceremonially representing the people of Israel. But for that enough, also, you don't need unanimous for that. Okay. And then there is a third option, and here is maybe, we have seen, if you remember, that actually the public bull is not brought from the general campaign for Korbanot Tzibur, like Tmidin and Musafin, the annual campaign of Chodesh Adar and Nisan, of the Shkalim. But we've seen, Rav Lichtenstein showed us that actually the public bull is brought from a separate campaign that you collect from every Jew. He wanted to support, because of that, he wanted to support the opinion that says that the public bull is not just an abstract construct of a sin of Klal Yisrael, but rather it is as if everyone is bringing an individual chatas. It's as if every individual has a portion in it. Yeah? His individual portion in it, and receives his individual atonement. Meaning the reason why he is exempt, remember Reb Chaim asked, why when a public bull is brought, why aren't still the individuals bringing each one an individual sin offering? And one of the answers was that indeed they bring, because the public bull serves also as an individual atonement. If you say that, then perhaps what they're saying is that, the public bull, yes, it's true. We have a requirement of a ruling of Sanhedrin, not just a mistake done by Tnuva, because a public bull is brought only when there's a certain concept of that it's a mistake of the klal, and not only of many individuals. And yet still, there's also here is an aspect of many individuals sinning, and therefore you don't, since the weight goes from the klal to just seeing it as many individuals, the minute you say that, then I just need a t'nai, I just need a certain condition, technical condition, that there'll be an issuing of Sanhedrin, but it could be done by a majority. You don't need unanimous. Now, let's look. Theoretically, I just want to say theoretically, we could have arrived at a certain compromise here. And that's what I said in the last minute of last week's shir. Theoretically, we could have arrived at an idea that says, I need 7 against Rabbi Yonathan, but not totally against him. Okay? Saying that I need 71 unanimously, and the rest of the 100 people, I don't need them to agree. You understand? Meaning I could have theoretically 3 opinions. I can have an opinion that says, even in a quorum of 71, it's enough that there is a majority ruling. If you ask me, that's the pshat of the Gemara. The pshat of the Gemara just dismissed Rabbi Yonathan's opinion about unanimous. Okay? All right. So I have one extremity, that's Rabbi Yonathan, saying even if there's a quorum of 100, I need all the 100 to agree to make the erroneous ruling. That's Rabbi Yonathan. The other end of the spectrum, there is what I think the pshat of the conclusion of our Gemara, that even when there's a quorum of 71, you don't need it to be unanimous. We go to the general law of a rule of all the Torah Kula that rubo kechulo. Okay? But there could be, and we found, a middle opinion. A middle opinion that makes a dochak in our Gemara and says that when the Gemara dismissed Rabbi Yonathan and said rubo kechulo, it didn't dismiss Rabbi Yonathan entirely. It is still needed that there will be, in order to bring a public bull, that the 71 Sanhedrin people will be unanimous. Only Rabbi Yonathan required that once they're 100 sitting, whatever quorum they're sitting, it needs always to be unanimous. This is dismissed. Here I say, rubo kechulo. The minute that you pass the threshold of 71 judges, the minute you pass that, then rubo kechulo. Okay? There could have theoretically been that middle opinion. Now, I want to give you the svara of this middle opinion. According to the way we formulated it, because I just saw it, Rav Lichtenstein and others bringing it technically. Now I'll give you the essence of it, the way I understand it. By the way, anyone wants, before I say it, I see we have only a few minutes left. And I promised that in 3 minutes we're going to the text, you see, never believe rabbis. But I'm just saying, but I think this analysis was important. We'll see it. I'm asking, such a middle opinion, a requirement for 71 that agree, that are unanimous, but once there are more than 71, I don't need that it will be unanimous. Okay? What could be the justification based on the formulations we did here, Rav Soloveitchik and all of our discussion? What could be a justification for such a svara? Obviously, when I ask for unanimous, what's the reason for that? We explained. That has more to be with the fact that I want it to be defined as an error of the public as a public, right? So perhaps Rabbi Yonathan says, as opposed to the Gemara says, okay, it represents majority, rubo kechulo, that's fine. Rabbi Yonathan says, no. Here, there is exeris hakatav, I need all. To be defined as the public as a public and not just many individuals, needs that all the Sanhedrin unanimously. So here, we explained that Rabbi Yonathan, obviously, to require that. So Gabe and I agreed that it's because he thinks that here, in order to be defined as an action of the public or a false ruling of the public, it's because the Sanhedrin here are wearing the ceremonial hat, also the ceremonial hat of representatives of the people of Israel. Okay? Now here is exactly the aspect that Rav Soloveitchik says, perhaps that's a set number. It's formal. You need 71 and only 71, Okay, you need 71. And I add, you need it unanimous, like appointing a king. So here's the point. Since they're wearing two hats, so I add more dayanim to have the discussion as interpreters of the Torah. So regarding the ruling, it's enough that it's majority ruling. However, since I want also the hat of the ceremonial hat of representatives of the people of Israel, so here I need 71 unanimous. A set number of unanimous.
Yeah. There would be really no purpose in expanding a Sanhedrin to 100. If you require a unanimous ruling, why are you expanding? It's 71 is 71. It's already.
Well, perhaps.
So
Yeah. What? Yeah.
So obviously, what you're looking for is an expanded opinion and divergent opinions and whatever. That's almost a given.
You're right. Absolutely right. And I guess they want 100 because they wanted that the 71 will be convinced, okay, to hear many ideas and discussions. Right. Yeah, you're absolutely right, Gabe. Very good point. So I was very happy. You see, I didn't see this in Rav Lichtenstein, but when I'm looking for that middle opinion and how to justify it, this is what I arrived with. I think it's very neat. Now, to end the shir, yeah, it's already 10, but here I do want to share with you a certain let's see if I'm in the right place. No, excuse me, I shared the wrong screen. Excuse me. Right, okay. Excuse me, here, I'm sharing the screen. We'll take 1 minute and we'll soon end the class, okay? Here, I'll make the letters much bigger, far bigger. Okay. We can make it also more friendly letters for a second. Here, and we'll make the letters bigger even more than what they are. Okay, so here, look, there is the Gemara, okay? The Gemara, when the Gemara tried to dismiss, Rabbi Yonathan's opinion that there is a need for 100 unanimously, the Gemara was challenging Rabbi Yonathan from a Mishnah in Daled Amud Bet, and then it dismissed it. Let's now quickly study the Mishnah. Horu Beidin ruled, V'yara echad me'en shetau. So there was a Sanhedrin, and one of the judges is aware that they are erroneous. And he told them, you guys are wrong. To'imatem. Okay. Or there was a person there, one of the 71 was not really authorized. He wasn't muflash al beidin. Or it turns out that one of the Sanhedrin members was a convert or a mamzer, or an elderly that can't have children. All of these are disqualifying him to be Sanhedrin. So, look, the Mishnah talks about a case that indeed they gave an erroneous ruling, and indeed the majority of the people of Israel followed that erroneous ruling. So, technically, there is a need for a bull. But then it turns out there was some disqualification with the quorum, okay? There was a convert there. There was one that wasn't really authorized. But the first example, look, after all the list of the people that weren't authorized or weren't qualified, there is that one told them, you're mistaken. And they ignored him. Harei ze patur. Harei ze patur. Then there is no public bull. Shenemar, the Mishnah says, kan eda, v'neemar lehalan eda. It says here eda regarding public bull, and it says eda also regarding Sanhedrin. Ma lehalan eda, the eda that is written later, it means that all of them are re'uyin lehora'ah, they are qualified to a ruling. Here also, eda ad sheyehu kulan, it means that all of them will be qualified for a ruling. So now there is a very simple question about this Mishnah. Forget that the Gemara, by the way, quoted only the first words of it. Yada echad mevamar to'inatem. Here, the Gemara, our Gemara stopped quoting it. Okay. But now when we read the Mishnah in its entire context, it's a Mishnah in Dalet Amud Bet. So now I'm learning you the Mishnah as it is, in its full context, not the way our Gemara quoted it, okay, because the Gemara quoted it selectively, only what was relevant for our purposes. But now when we learn it in its entire context, it's very, very clear. The topic of the Mishnah is when the Sanhedrin issued a ruling, when one of the members, at least one of them, turns out that he wasn't qualified. And it says, Af Eda Murakan, Eda Adat Yisrael, Imishgu Kol Adat Yisrael. Eda means till all of them will be qualified to ruling. So now I have a very simple question about the text. I understand what it means if one wasn't authorized, mufla, or one was a ger. But what is the first example of the Mishnah? V'yada echad mehen sheta'u ve'amar lahem to'imatem. Right? That's the first example. And by the way, the relevant example for us, that's what the Ar Gemara quotes. What does that have to do with the topic of the Mishnah? Because the topic of the Mishnah is Ad sheyehu kulan ruyin lahora. And indeed, these are the examples. One that wasn't authorized, one that was a ger, one that was a mamzer. Okay, so not all of them were qualified to hora. But if one of them said, you're mistaken, and he told them, you're mistaken, and they ignored him, what does that have to do with the topic of our Mishnah? So, what do you say? First of all, is the question understood? Why is when one is saying to the Sanhedrin, one of the members saying, you're mistaken, and they ignore him, and they vote against him, why are they patur? And why? The reason for the patur is because it needs that all of them will be re'uyin lehora, qualified to ruling. Where is the disqualification for the ruling here? The story here is that he told them you're mistaken, and they said that he knew that they're mistaken, and he told them you're mistaken. What does it have to do with all the rest? That it turns out that one was a ger, was a mamzer. So look, I have an answer. Anyone has an idea for an answer?
Well, it proves there's no unanimity there.
Right, but the fact that there was no unanimity, that means that one of them was disqualified. How is that? Actually, kulan re'uyin lehora. Kulan re'uyin lehora. That's the requirement of the Mishnah, right? When the Mishnah makes the general ruling of all the examples that were mentioned before, and then the Mishnah is that there is a requirement that kulan yehu, that all of them will be qualified for ruling. Okay, so here, right, you're right, Gabe. What we see here that there wasn't a unanimous ruling, but does that mean that there was that the requirement for kulan ruyin lehora wasn't met? Or it's two different things. Nachon? But Gabe is right. The only analogy we see here is that the kulan, the word kulan is the common denominator. So it seems that the Mishnah is saying a tremendous innovation, nachon, right? That when it wasn't a unanimous ruling, it's as if they weren't qualified to hurrah. To be qualified to such a ruling of public bull, you need that it will be unanimous. So first of all, it's a big support of Rabbi Yonathan, right?
Yeah.
And that's what the Gemara claimed. By the way, that's exactly what our Gemara said. The first clause of the Mishnah of Daled Amud Bet that we just learned appeared in our Gemara. The Gemara, when it was challenged, it tried to support Rabbi Yonathan, but actually it didn't bring it as a support. It brought it as a challenge, because the Gemara says, "Oh, it's only when he said it's mistaken. But if he's quiet, even though there is not unanimity, it's okay." So the Gemara actually turned a source that seems very supportive of Rabbi Yonathan against him. But that has to do perhaps with the purpose of our Gemara. But Tachlis, there is a tremendous innovation here, l'chora. Okay? Now, one could have said something a little more moderate, meaning one could have said that since he said to them, "You're mistaken," and they ignored him, so that already turns them to be not qualified of hurrah. that thing itself, because they're ignoring him. Or, on the flip side, you could say, perhaps the interpretation of the source, No, and by the way, if I explain it this way, then indeed there is a distinction. In principle, majority ruling is fine. Also here, against Rabbi Yonah, there's no requirement for unanimous ruling. No. But if someone says explicitly, he's not just quiet and voting against. If he tells them, "You guys are wrong," because that's the case here. To'inatem, he tells them, challenges them, and they ignore him, that makes them disqualified to make the hurrah. That is one option. Another option, more moderate, is to say, look, if he is not with them, and he is not with them, because he says to them, you guys are wrong, then it's considered, that's kind of what you said about unanimous ruling. What we said, Rabbi Yonah, is that if he explicitly, there it says, "You guys are wrong," I can't see it as if he is one of the people that are issuing the ruling. So he's kind of disqualified for that specific ruling. He's like a ger. He is like a ger here. That's, he's like the ger. He's like the mamzer. Why? Because he excluded himself from the ruling. He made himself disqualified for that ruling. So that's why, since I have a requirement that all will be qualified for ruling, automatically that requires some kinds of unanimity. Okay?
This leads to intimidation. Someone would be afraid to voice an opinion that is divergent, and you would think then, okay, I'm going to shut up because I'm going to be equated with a ger or with a mamzer or whatever. That's peer pressure.
It's only a technical equation, of course.
Sure, of course.
But you're right. But look at what Rashi says here, okay? And then we'll end the shir. We're ending the shir really soon. Rashi says here, on this Mishnah of Daled Amud Bet, Ve'amar lahem to'imatem. Now, of course, Rashi detected what troubled us. This is a pshat problem that is so clear that the first case, l'chora, has nothing to do with all the rest of the cases, right? There, one that wasn't authorized, all of this. This is indeed examples of the general concept of you need that all will be qualified to hurrah. But what does that have to do with one who knew that they're mistaken and told them that they're mistaken? Rashi, of course, detected that problem. And look at what Rashi says, amazing. V'amar lahem to'imatem, lo have hora'a ma'alya ufatur. This is not considered a good hurrah. Meaning, just like when a ger gives an hora, it's a disqualified hora. It's not defined as a good hora. Also, when one says you're mistaken and voices it, it's not a good hora, ufatur. B'ma'inan, and here he adds, ad sheyoru kulan kedamar le'il. Now, this Rashi, all the Rishonim and the Achronim attacked him. What is Rashi here saying? Why there is a disqualification? Because it's true that our Mishnah says that you need that all will be qualified for ruling, but actually the Mishnah even says more. It says that you need that they will all rule unanimously, as we said previously. Who said it previously? Rabbi Yonathan, right? It's clear that Rashi here speaks in Daled Amud Bet, page 4, daf 4. And in page 3, Gimel Amud Bet, Rabbi Yonathan says that we need Ad Sheyoru Kulam. That's what he said. So Rashi says, you know, this Mishnah is really agreeing with Rabbi Yonathan. What's the problem? That is the way he explains it. He said, it is not a good hora. In order to be defined as a good hora, to have a public bull, you need a unanimous ruling. And that is why when one said you're mistaken, there's no good hora here, because you require, when the Mishnah here says, Ad sheyu kulan ru'uyin lo hora, it's not only Ad sheyu kulan ru'uyin lo hora, it needs that Ad sheyoru kulan. I would say even more according to Rashi. What's the problem when a ger is part of the quorum, that they're not all ru'uyin lo hora? The problem is really that it wasn't a ruling of all. You understand? Meaning the way Rashi reads the Mishnah, the real criteria is that I need a unanimous ruling. Now, of course, if there was a unanimous ruling, but one of the members was a ger, was a mamzer, then there wasn't a unanimous ruling. So why do I need that all will be qualified to a ra? So that I'll meet the criteria of Ad Sheyoru Kulam. This is the real criteria behind everything. Now Rashi says, I understand the Mishnah perfectly. Actually, the Mishnah brought the most simple idea. A, there wasn't a unanimous ruling. One said you're wrong. Then there wasn't Yoru Kulan. And then all the rest of the examples, even if there was, the Mishnah goes from the simple case to the more innovative one. The most simple case is just simply there wasn't unanimous ruling. And then even if there was a unanimous ruling, if part of the quorum was not ra'ui lehora'ah, then it's as if all of them, there wasn't a unanimous ruling, a valid unanimous ruling. Rashi is brilliant in terms of interpretation of the pshat of the Mishnah. Okay? The only problem is that what does Rashi contradict? And here we can stop the sharing. And Rashi says, the Mishnah really says that you need a unanimous ruling. Just like Rabbi Yonathan said beforehand. The Mishnah agrees with Rabbi Yonathan that you need a unanimous ruling in order to have a public bull. Ad sheyoru kulan. But what's the problem? You guys learned 2 weeks ago the Gemara in Gimel Amud Bet, and I mentioned it in the beginning of this year. Was Rabbi Yonathan's opinion accepted or rejected? What was the conclusion of the Gemara? The conclusion of our Gemara in Gimel Amud Bet was that Rabbi Yonathan is rejected. That was the conclusion of our Gemara. The Gemara proved from the fact that it says Hagoy Kulo regarding the decrees on Am Yisrael that Rubo Kechulo, right? The Gemara, Rabbi Yonathan says it says you're Kol Adat Yisrael, so you need a unanimous ruling for it to be defined as a ruling. Comes our Gemara and proves at the end from the pasuk of decrees on Am Yisrael that actually when it says kol, it means majority. So our Gemara's conclusion was against Rabbi Yonathan. So how come Rashi comes and says the Mishnah in the next page is actually a Mishnah that follows Rabbi Yonathan's opinion? So that's a big time problem. It's as if the two sugyot ignore each other. Furthermore, our sugya that dismissed Rabbi Yonathan brought that Mishnah as a proof against Rabbi Yonathan, saying that only if one says you're mistaken, then it's not a valid ruling for public bull. But if one was quiet, even if he disagreed, then what? You don't need a majority ruling, a unanimous ruling. So let's see the Tosfot Arosh. Horu beidim ve'yada echad mem sheta'u v'amar perish Rashi zal delo have ora'ah ma'alya ufturim debeinan ad she'eru kulam keder minan le'il vehiksha alav harama zal, one of the Rishonim, Reb Meir Abulafia, ve'haitayim el Rabbi Natanu ve'irututav le'il. We gave a knockout to Rabbi Yonathan. How come Rashi explains the Mishnah not like the halacha? So therefore, the Ramah brings a different interpretation than Rashi. So we'll end up here now. We'll continue next week. Okay? More close to the text and continuing in our Mishnah and Gemara. Shabbat Shalom.
Shabbat Shalom.
Shabbat Shalom lekulam.
Shabbat Shalom.
Shabbat Shalom.
Shabbat Shalom.